You're good to go, Samik.
Thank you. All right. So in this session, we are going to talk about, so basically before we get started, right, again, thanks a lot for everyone for joining today. And today we're going to discuss around mostly Purview and Defender, and that's where we go, right? And I would always recommend you all to stick till the end of the session because we have some interesting quiz. And as you see, there'll be a lot of goodies available at the end of the quiz. So please stick to the end. Make sure that you get a chance to win those goodies, right? With that said, I'm Samik Roy, and here's my LinkedIn QR code if you want to connect. And this is what we're going to talk about today is about Supercharge your Defender Advanced Hunting with MCP Server tool. And myself, I'm a Microsoft MVP and an author of a book for KQL for Sentinel and also a Microsoft certified trainer, right? So before we even get started, right, quickly, what I would like to talk about, right, the way advanced hunting has evolved over time, and that's been very crucial, for security teams, SOC teams, or managed service provider, whoever basically caters directly or indirectly to the customers. And now the way as of today, or so far, it has been working. Any new threat comes in the market, somebody as a detection engineer or as a threat hunter, we pick it up and then we try to create a query, which is mostly based out of KQL, because that is something beyond our direct incident analysis. So we want to go to the data set and then go from there, right? And that's been the traditional one, right? So if we look at the next stage, what it is going to be happening right now, right? And with the AI infusion and with AI in place, right? How do we can evolve over there? Because couple of things what I already know, right? There are alert floods in SOC, like you have hundred thousands of alerts a day, right? I mean, as a SOC analyst, you definitely don't get much time even to analyze the alerts. So advanced hunting is always an overhead beyond that, right? And if you're an enterprise, that the number goes higher and higher, right? So the end goal, I would say, this is where I would start with. The end goal would be like investigating acceleration. So the way we investigate, either it's for example a brute force comes in. I mean, I always love that alert because I'll try to give an example of that. So the brute force comes in, or let's say phishing campaign, right? Then there's an incident, and what you would do as a threat hunter or the SOC analyst, you would look at the incident, you would write some more advanced hunting query, and then that itself takes like more than an hour to analyze the whole incident, right? But here, what you're going to talk about is you would be able to accelerate that time from hour to minutes. So your mean time to response goes up and your operational consistency also grows, right? And what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, right now, what is happening today, let's say there are senior and junior SOC analysts, right? And everybody doesn't come back from the same background. That means like somebody might come from, let's say, a Windows operating system background. On the other hand, somebody might come from a Linux background, right? So if you talk about sysmon or syslog, right, these are two different terms. Depending on which background you are in, definitely have an expertise, right? But so that basically what happens with that is it it doesn't make an operational consistency because with that some team members are well versed with certain technologies and some are not. Now with this advanced and method, what I want to talk about today, it's going to be consistent because doesn't matter which background you come from, you might not need that level of technical expertise. Rather, you would need an expertise of how to solve an incident, how to understand, what playbook to run and things like that. So that basically look at and standardize your operational consistency, I would say. Obviously, needless to say, right? Seamless AI integration. The reason we say it, right? Because I'll be using VS Code as a tool today, which is more of a developer tool, but you can also leverage that using Security Copilot, using Office 365 Copilot Studio, any other tool, right? So technically, all we need a large language model or any language model technically to talk to that server in Defender. And how do we basically write the queries, whatever we do in Defender? So technically, whatever we have been doing right now, the process remains same, but the steps are optimized and abstracted within MCP, Model Construct Protocol. People who do not know about what it is. I mean, obviously everybody knows in today's world, but if you are very new, technically you write a set of APIs that is exposed in a way, or that's made available in a way that it can be consumed by a language model, and then with that language model you can talk to that naturally. Then obviously, because Defender is customer specific support, right? Now, the way we have been writing queries and advanced hunting methodologies we are following, right? So they are very specific to customer. Let's say you're working for an enterprise customer, or you're running a managed SOC, but you still have certain common parameters. Again, for example, phishing or brute force, right? Though the logic or the way we do threat hunting is same, but parameters are different. For example, if we just double click on brute force, so with brute force, we know that the fundamental definition is you have a couple of failures attempts, then suddenly you have one success. Now, the number of failure to success ratio always depends. And that is where the customization. So you have to have the tenant specific details, which is localized and stuff like that. That's one part of logical part of it. And the second, exact technical part of it is when you connect to an environment, right? You can really from your VS Code, you can connect to one of the environments and then do threat hunting with that. So you're totally localized in that matter. So technically, if you're doing a threat hunting, and in my demo, right, though I will try to open Defender console, right, but I would definitely not use that as a part of the threat hunting process, which I'm going to do demo today. And beyond that, every customer is unique by nature, right? That means with every customer, you get some custom log sources. That can be their application log, that can be very specific to their other systems and things like that. That can be their kind of, proprietary data sets, things like that, right? So that is what is the strategic overview of the entire SOC or advanced hunting with, MCP is what you want to talk about, right? Now, when you start doing that, obviously these are step-by-step process, and I said these are more of logical conclusion. Now, if I go a little bit of detail technically, and the reason I have chosen Defender, because Defender is have the XJ capabilities, and that basically covers your entire Office estate. Like it's your endpoint data, it's your email data, it's your cloud apps and your identity data. So that technically builds the whole corporate environment or pillar, right? So that means once you are able to connect to Defender, that means you are able to connect to your endpoint devices data. And then if I just try to break down, right, endpoint data can be like device events, device process events, device network events, device file events. Now, and then device registry events also available. And there are a couple of other tables which Microsoft offers. That means Microsoft already has, or rather Defender already has as a product, all the raw logs ingested. Similar goes to email data, right? There are email attachment info, there are email, you will click every verbose log is being captured. But as a part of threat hunting, when I do that, right, obviously we want to do or want to threat hunt or want to utilize all of the tables when we do threat hunting. But the time is our biggest enemy when we are in an attack scenario, right? Because we are already in a P1 or high severity incident, investigating, or even for advanced hunting. It has its own scale of advanced hunting and details and things like that. Now, though we want to, but the process is also known to us. That means we do threat hunting, we go for the hypothesis, we go for the KQL query building, we go for the running. Now, the process of translating a hypothesis to KQL query building is wrong. Let's say one query might take like 30 to 45 minutes, right? Based on the complexity, or testing phase and things like that. Now we are trying to optimize the whole thing so that you can just get your hypothesis, get them created, have them ready, and then you just call them and utilize them. Same thing we're going to talk about, let's say identity data, right? In terms of that, Defender already has, like, what I'm talking about here is there are a couple of things which are already there in terms of identity data, or I'd say cloud ops data, right? So everything, whatever happens in your directory, provided you have Defender for Identity installed in your, Active Directory servers. So you get logon events, you got directory events, you got query events, and same for cloud apps. So in a nutshell, um, you have the data, and it's been followed as well. Like that's the standard process of threat hunting. You look at the threat coming in, you look at how to investigate, you translate that to each table that has to be and things like that, right? So now that hypothesis, once you do it time and again, you don't need to build the queries. You can really put that as an MCP server or as a tool, which, as I said, I'm going to demonstrate that, in the demo, and see how step by step it's like, kind of, I would say it's a plug and play a scenario. Once you do it, maybe a senior SOC analyst or anybody as a security architect configure it for one time, and then it just stays there. Everybody can use it. And this also, let me get to the next one, right? The way it does, right? So we do development, we look at what is recurring scenarios, let's say phishing, let's say sign-in logs and things like that, right? Then we go for the tool creation. So tool creation is the word tool here, right? It might sound a little complex, but it's really simple because it's technically a KQL query and a function. So bunch of line of KQL query, which might vary depending on your need. But once you write that query, you can parameterize, save that as a function, and then that becomes your tool. That's all about the tool. Then once you build the tool, you integrate that tool, and I would say by design itself, that gets integrated as a tool for a MCP server. All right. And then you start identifying, utilizing, and then eventually, as I say, right, no query is perfect at the very first time. So there has to be a continuous feedback loop is what I would, look for again and again, for the refinement sake. As I gave an example a while ago, if you talk about brute force, the parameters, the tuning pointers, let's say 5 failures, 1 success, that becomes 3 failure, 1 success kind of ratio, right? Those changes has to have as a part of continuous feedback loop. Or maybe, when you talk about some IP, right? You just isolate your cloud vendor IP or your SaaS provider IP addresses if there are too much hits from that, or if there's a service account expiry and things like that. So that was, the way I would say we are trying to develop, how kind of, uh, the process of writing a tool in MCP server and calling that an operation, make it into operations. And that's a 4-step process. And obviously there's a continuous feedback loop. Now let's take a look at the structure of it, right? How it's going to look like. Again, I would possibly have one of these in the demo, but if you need to logically segregate and understand how it's going to work, imagine that this is you already have, or if you're running a SOC, right, you already have a bunch of playbooks, right? And you have the structure in place already because, any SOC you take, they have their own playbooks, be it for email security, be it for endpoint, be it for identity access, or be it for network data. And then within that, you have your use cases, let's say phishing investigation, bulk campaign, ransomware behavior, things like that, right? Then what is that I'm going to do is identity access, brute force privilege escalation. So I'm going to take the playbook and then build that in the query and then go from there, right? So that's basically this is something you already have, right? You just need to translate that as an MCP so that you are able to use it using VS Code itself, right? That's basically the ask for it. Now, by doing this, right, if we try to talk about what is the outcome we're going to get, let's take a look at the outcome we are going to get, right? And then after this, we will take a small example and then we'll try to get on the demo. But if we talk about really the legacy one, right? And I understand, and after working with many SOC teams, I can see that the legacy process is still operational, right? So you have ad hoc query generation. Now, again, there are two ways, right? You can also use AI to generate your queries, but that doesn't guarantee or that doesn't help you the queries being written right. Rather, I would say the process of writing the query with the mix of AI, build your queries, test it, and once you test it, put that in its MCP, that becomes a lot more valuable. Now with that, obviously, ad hoc query generation is one of them, right? And then once we write that, these days, we start using AI tools to write our query, and there's a high chance we do a syntactical error, or we start typing in columns which doesn't exist in the table, right? Because there is no validation when we are writing the query. These are the things, even in the past also that has happened. And if you talk about the product itself, right? Defender might come up with some new tables and the schema changes, and a lot of the tables, for example, sign-in logs, right? So if you talk about sign-in logs has a column called conditional access policy. Now, depending on how much conditional access policy that particular customer or organization have, right? That many JSON nodes get created. So let's say you have written a query giving an index of a conditional access policy, and suddenly that changes. So there are a couple of inconsistencies, in the query structure, and there is a high chance leading to like false, a lot of false positive, right? Um, there are certain things which is little bit to do with the depth of the query. For example, we are trying to do a blast radius query. We're trying to look at, for example, if a user is signed in, look at the last 60 days signed in, look at his longitude, latitude, right? Which is a good way to write KQL query. Now, you are supposed to define the difference between your first longitude, latitude and the last longitude, latitude, or I would say the variety, right? And you get a circular blast radius out of it. Now, in that said, that's a good query, but that's not going to work for every customer or every environment. Let's say you go for a customer who's in Europe, right? There are a lot of countries with very lower perimeters. Is very difficult. So people kind of keep switching stuff, and then the blast radius might be varying. Or also there are countries, or there are locations, right, which is used as a static IP address. People use static IP address so they don't change. Now coming back to India as a subcontinent or country, we always DHCP. So suddenly you see with the new internet service provider, your IP address routing through everywhere. So your blast radius is really India's entire environment, right? So those are the things which is the inconsistency in the query which comes with depth. So all those things are done in legacy. That's not, that cannot be captured, right? And then obviously the knowledge problem, right? If there'll be definitely one or two folks who will be able to only write the queries and it remains with them, and then it gets iterated, and the knowledge is lost in the process. That's kind of manual thing. Now, fast forward today, right? Or fast forward tomorrow, for example, what we would going to get, assuming that we're able to operationalize or able to execute this advanced hunting with MCP and Defender, or let's say any of the LLM tools, which is Security Copilot, Copilot Studio, GitHub as such, we're going to get an execution with the revalidation. That means the queries are tested, right? And then the syntactical accuracy is there. Otherwise, LLM is going to tell you, and when you're building the query, you're testing the query, right? And you have standardized your way of threat hunting. So now the definition of phishing, the definition of brute force is similar across the whole SOC team. So now if a query is fine-tuned, the false positive ratio goes down throughout the term. It's not 1%, right? So the velocity increases, the mean time to response, mean time to closure, all the metrics, which is basically the fundamental SOC metrics, as they go down time to time, right? And above all, the investigation, which was taking around an hour, just giving an example, or an hour or 2 hour, right? That comes down to like 10 to 15 minutes. So your bandwidth also goes higher. And that not only frees up the analyst investigation time, that gives the analyst the feasibility or the flexibility to explore new threats going forward, and then build more advanced hunting, which can be again executed, with AI scale as such, right? Now, this is a reference, right? So let's say I'll just quickly jump onto the KQL query, what's gonna be written here, right? So as I say, right, target device. If you look at this query, this is a very simple example, right? Target query device name, remote execution tool is fixed, and these are the query written. So imagine this. This is basically a definition of a tool, which I'm going to show again. Right? Device name is parameterized. So similar query, if you want to build it for a particular user, right? You parameterize the user principal name or username, and then you can run that query by only passing that username from the LLM itself, right? That basically is what I would say that tool does. And as I said, the moment you add it to MCP, that's a part of the tool. That's how it's going to be. We'll look at the examples when we're in a demo. Next thing, what's the end goal look like, or what is the future proofing, and how do we amplify, right? So obviously we democratize expertise. Now, how do we do that? As I spoke in my earlier slides, right now there are a couple of things. If somebody writes a query, he's very good at writing query, right? That stays with the person, right? And it's very difficult to translate that translate that knowledge at times. Apart from that, right, people come into SOC from different aspect, different experience level. Somebody coming from network background, somebody from Linux, somebody from Windows, somebody from PowerShell, somebody even from development, right? So by having this, you're democratizing this because your console, your core IP, or I would say the definition of your tools stays within Defender or stays with you, right? Then doesn't matter as long as the person who is investigating, they understand what the logical flow of a brute force or a phishing campaign or phishing attack is. They can just run it. They can ask a simple question, and that scales your operation because that reduces the training time, that reduces your all sort metrics, response time, resolution time, and things like that. And as a result of that, what happens is your knowledge is preserved within your environment, right? So the investigation scenarios or the playbooks, what you build, right? They are not only Word document, PDF, PPTs, not anymore, right? They're actually working knowledge, working materials, working tools built in your environment, tweaked for your environment, right? So those are the benefits, I would say, whenever we are talking about the integrated SOC with advanced hunting. Now, I think it's been a while I've been talking, so let's try to jump on to the demo right now. And I'm logged into an environment, which is Defender, and I'll just take some time, as I mentioned earlier, right? The demo I'm going to run, I'm not going to, I'm not going to use Defender portal at all for my investigation. I'll totally use something else. So that means it's local to me, and any investigation person or any person who is a SOC analyst can run that. So for that, just to begin with, I'd go to incident response, alerts, or rather hunting and advanced hunting. And in advanced hunting, if you look at, let me reduce this so that I can get some more space. If you're into tools, that's fine. If you're not into tools, you basically, as you can see, there are two MCP servers which I've already created, right? So technically, I'll go and then I'll go to tools, right? If you go to the tools tab, that's where you get it. So you actually create this MCP servers, and then you can create a tool. So let me expand these things, right? And I have just say, as I said, investigate phishing email, right? And let me try to, I can delete edit tool and I can edit the tool. Let me edit the tool. So if you look at the tool, right, I've given a name of it. I've given a description. I've given a collection where it should go, demo workspace, on which workspace it's going to run. Now, this is the fun part, right? Like if you are managing multi-tenant with a customer, you can actually specify the, workspaces here, which is not supposed to run by default and things like that. And this is the parameter. So here, what I'm saying is I'm passing the user principal name as a parameter, right? And that's the query is what it says. So let's say I've written queries, and these are the things, is a one-time activity because every SOC analyst, every threat hunting team does this on a regular basis. And these are defined already possibly in your playbooks. So all you're going to do is pick up the playbook, create the tool, and save it in a collection. Once you do that, right, let me see MCP test. There is one called MCP test. Let me also edit this tool. Let's see what it does. It does something around sign-in logs, right, for example, and then the collection is different. The demo is here and things like that. And tool to return sign-in logs for the users provided. So I'm taking very simple example. This query can really go complex as and when you want. Now, let me cancel this. And what I would right now do is let me try to get that. So as I said, there are a couple of options there, right? I can actually use in Security Copilot if you're using it, which is fine. You can use in Copilot Studio, which is also LLM-based tool by Microsoft, or Studio. OpenAI Foundry. This also, we can choose your own model and things like that. You can create another tool. If I do, it's going to ask me a new query. I'm going to close it right now. And the last one is, let's say, I'd say copy link to MCP server. So I'm going to copy the link. It got copied. Now, next thing, I'm going to open my Visual Studio Code. Again, a free tool, right? And in here, I have my GitHub Copilot license assigned, and that's why you can see that. So let me get to the full screen mode. And because I'm in the full screen mode, all I'm going to do is I have done some testing. You can see the results, but I'm not gonna open that up. Let me open. You say Control Shift P. So that's the fundamental way. As you can see, show all commands. So I would say Control Shift P, and first thing, if that doesn't come, you just say MCP add a server, right? And in here, you can local command. The option we're supposed to choose You can actually choose all of these, but because we're talking about Defender Advanced Hunting and we copied the HTTP URL, right? I'm just gonna click on HTTPS server sent events. And you say Control V, space that. So you see sentinel.microsoft.com/mcp/custom VKG demo. So that's the one. So I'm gonna hit enter, and then you can keep it your name. I'll just keep it as it is and then hit enter. And what I would do is it'll ask, do you want this to be globally? Now, because I have other projects running in my VS Code, I'm going to do that at a workspace level. So this is only accessible within this workspace. And I'm going to click on that here. As you can see, the moment I added, there's nothing here in the repo or the workspace. All it has is mcp.json. And then, it wants you to authenticate. So I'm going to authenticate it. And let me open it here. And because I have already authenticated, possibly it will not ask for authentication, but for the first time, it might log in to the tenant with your credential, and you just let it do that, right? But again, giving that, you're not giving a free access. I'm going to come to that later. Now you can see there are two MCP servers I have added here, right? All are running. You can stop them, you can restart them, you can look at the tools, and you can go for more. When you stop it, when you don't want to use it, right? When you kind of restart it, if you have created a new tool and things like that. Now, that's where I would say you're gonna look at. Now, just to verify, right, all my tools are available. What I would do is let me first copy one of the existing form, or rather, let me just copy brute force. Let me just check that. There was one. And let me create a new chat here. So I've created a new chat here, and then what I'm going to do is click on this configure tool icon in the right side bottom here, and you can see it listed down all the tools I have, and you see these are the two MCP servers which got added here. You can see the things from the back, and these are the two things. And if I expand that, right, you see investigate phishing email. The tool is already enabled here, and MCP test is also enabled here, right? So let me click on that, and then what I would do, can just write a simple prompt. Can you check? Can you do phishing? Or rather, just for simplicity's sake, I would go here. I'd go to MCP demo and copy here. Go back. Can you do a phishing email? Can you investigate phishing email for Samit Roy? That's all I'm going to write. So I'm going to hit enter, and let me just put the stream to the mainstream and look at what it does. It rephrased the question. It says, I will help you to do that, and I'll investigate. And again, as I talked about the permission stuff, right? So what exactly happened? Though I have authenticated, it's going to confirm the user principal name and the workspace ID, right? Why it is doing so? Now, for that to know, we need to go back to the Defender and look at that, edit the tool. So if I edit the tool quickly, you'll be able to see that user principal name is a parameter here, correct? So that's what it is asking, and the default workspace is set. But if you want to pass on any workspace, because with now, if you have Sentinel enabled, you can have multiple workspaces as well. So that's fundamentally is the reason why it is asking me for any more, right? So I'm going to say here, I'm going to click on that, allow for this session, always allow in the workspace. I would say, just to start with, always I'll click allow for only one time, so that we always know, right, when the LLM here is calling the MCP. So I'm going to hit allow right now. And once it allows, it is running the query, as you see, right? Completed my MCP server. And then if you look at this, that was the one, right? Yep. So that basically happened. And as a result of that, that's the input. It says all of these details here, and then it is processing the results, right? And it is reading the result. You don't need to, exactly open that, but just so that you understand that I opened the investigation also, what is actually happening. So you see, it went to the column, and then it went to that particular thing, and then it went to the tenant, and so on and so on. And you see what it did, right? Good. I found the data to summarize. So one more thing, right? Because it's an LLM, though I was asking only user principal name, but still it took only my name and converted that to the respective UPN, and then looked at the sign-in logs. Location is this, and then IP address, it got it, and then the Windows system I'm using, and it is giving me the verdict right now, phishing email investigation report, right? So user information, user ID, tenant ID, sign-in activity, all observed sign-in attempts have been right successful. This is the geographic location. Application used: Microsoft Power BI, Visual Studio Code, Team Services, Microsoft Graph, Windows 10, device information, and obviously I'm using this intentionally just to make sure we get some logs, normal activity indicators, all of these potential concerns, right? Sign-ins from three different cities. So see, it is before even it is saying yes or no, right? It also have given me potential finding. So that piece. So all I did is we wrote the KQL query and defined that in that particular thing, and then we are calling that as an MCP. And LLM is basically said nothing detected, no risk flag. Now it also gives me some sort of recommendation. Now it tells me if the multi location sign-in is valid for the user's known travel thing, multi-factor is there for all sign-ins, conditional access policy. The conclusion: no immediate phishing indicator detected, all sign-ins appear legitimate, so on and so forth, right? Now, what this technically mean? All I did is wrote a KQL query, and then imagine that as a part of threat hunter, right? How long it's going to take. So for me, all I did, going to go I just only wrote, it's a very simple sign-in log query, right? Only based on that query, and just because I've given some description, I'll just gonna expand that, right? LLM gonna look at certain things and look at all of the details, right? And what it returns and things like that. And based on that, it is going to give me the full verdict, which is possibly going to take, I'll let you guess the time, how long it's going to take if you're into SOC, right? Do it manually. So that was, a fundamentally simple demo. Now, what I'm trying to say is here, you can have your SOC playbooks, convert them into MCPs and tools and define them. And once it is defined, I'm using VS Code. You can use Visual Studio. Sorry, you can use a security copilot. You can use Copilot Studio, or you can use any other LLM-based tool which supports MCP and then start an investigation. So if you look at, apart from creating that particular query, I didn't even go to the Defender console at all to do the threat hunting. And it gives me really a good idea of what's going on. Now I can ask more questions. I can go further from there and so on and so forth. So that was really a quick demo of using Defender Advanced Hunting with MCP. All right. So with that said, let me just get back to the demo section, and I'm gonna get to a concluding slide for you. Let me just go back to the concluding, sorry for that, concluding slide here, right? So if I meant to summarize whatever we are talking about, the modern SOC workflow transition, it's going to be strategic evolution of threat hunting, obviously massive reduction of time, intelligent model context protocol, unified org intelligence, and then the AI-driven operational workflow, because your tools are same, your tools are unified. You have specialized threat detection collections, which I showed as a tool demo. You have seamless tool development because once you do it, you are done there. Significant productivity gains, because I just showed you a real life example of threat hunting or investigation analysis, right? That how fast it's going to be, and I'll let you imagine that how generally it takes, in a real time scenario. Now, looking from a approach conversion, what you see is in traditional, there's a multi-setup console investigation. You go to 5 tools, 5 places. You did in one place here, with natural language interaction. You don't need to know KQL. You just need to understand, what the meaning of that particular threat or investigation you're doing. And there's a high chance of syntactical error, which is, going to get by pre-validated queries. Substantial time commitment. As I said, that's a huge win, right? And it's an immediate productivity increase with that, right? So with that said, I would definitely open up for question. And thank you everyone for being in a wonderful audience. So please, if you have question, feel free to share them in the chat, or you can just raise it. And here's my LinkedIn for me to connect.